They've crossed the line here. This is out of control.
I know, it's just simply disgusting, and any network that covers that is disgusting as well. So I'm hoping DOJ steps in there and see if they cross that line.
Trump's feud with CNN is escalating to the point where law enforcement may be getting involved. We're going to break this down and so much more on today's episode of the Brad versus Everyone podcast, where I take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from my independent perspective. Thank you guys for bearing with me in my new apartment as I try out different shots and different angles. It was cool to have, the really awesome view as the background yesterday, but then it's hard to get good lighting on my face, which, of course, is my moneymaker. So anyway, guys, I know you come here for the substance, not for anything shallow like that. So let's talk about our first story for today, which is a interesting, I guess, development where CNN is now in the crosshairs of federal law enforcement, including top Trump administration officials threatening to potentially criminally prosecute them over some of their recent coverage, where they covered and explained what was going on with a new app, like a mobile app called ICE Block, where people could report the presence of ICE, so immigration customs enforcement agents, and alert other people to their presence. Although the app says don't interfere, don't do anything violent, it just lets you know where they are, and people are wondering why that information is being spread for any reason other than trying to evade immigration enforcement. Anyway, here is CNN's coverage of that app that now has the Department of Justice looking at potentially prosecuting the network over it. Take a look.
The Trump administration steps up ICE raids and mass deportations. One tech developer is pushing back with an app designed to track ICE activity in real time. It's called ICE Block, and it's controversial to say the least. Senator Claire Duffy is with us now. How does this work, Claire, and what are the legal implications?
Yeah, John, I talked with Joshua Aaron, who is the longtime tech worker who developed this platform, and he said he really wants it to be an early warning system for people about the location of immigrations and customs enforcement officers. So he says he does not want people interfering with those officers' activity, but he does want people to be able to avoid them altogether if they want. So you open the app, it looks like a map, and users can tap the map to report an ICE sighting in their area, and then everybody who uses the platform within 5 miles of that sighting will get a push alert. This is a free iPhone app. It is anonymous. Aaron says he doesn't collect any user data. And what I think is really interesting about this in this moment is we've seen so many of the biggest leaders in tech supporting President Trump, but Aaron is sort of an example of the fact that there are people within the tech industry who are really resistant to Trump's policies. I asked him what he would say to those tech leaders who, for example, were at the inauguration. Here's what he told me. Take a listen.
I understand that you have shareholders to report to. I understand that you have employees that need their paychecks. But at what point do you say enough is enough?
And John, I should say that ICE did not respond when I asked them about this platform.
I love this guy's God complex where he's like really thinks he's the new Rosa Parks because he is building an app that helps people potentially evade immigration enforcement. Not quite the same thing, but okay. Anyway, so I am not a fan of CNN. Y'all have seen me drag and mock CNN and hosts and contributors many times. We're literally going to do that later this episode, y'all, because we have another diabolical clip that's gone viral. But was anything really so bad about that coverage? They kind of just reported what was happening. They mentioned that it was controversial. They asked ICE for comment, to which they didn't receive any, so they can't include their perspective then if they don't reply to them. So, I mean, maybe they should have been more critical of the app and included the perspective of somebody who thinks it's potentially illegal. And we'll get into that, whether the app itself is legal or illegal. It's in a murky territory, is what I would say. But CNN's coverage here, I mean, I'm not nominating it for a Pulitzer, but it certainly wasn't a criminal act simply broadcasting this, or was it? That's what some Trump administration officials are actually claiming. So Stephen Miller, who is one of the White House's top advisors, wrote that CNN is openly helping invaders and insurrectionists sabotage ICE. what? They are reporting on an app that maybe the existence of an app that you could say maybe does that. But are we supposed to believe the people who are on the lookout for this kind of, ICE enforcement wouldn't have gotten this app if CNN didn't broadcast about it? And regardless, I mean, you can broadcast and cover things and you're not responsible for the fact that people are drawn to them, right? If you cover a new drug craze on your news broadcast and some people see it and go try it, you didn't do a crime. That's not how reporting or journalism works. But, maybe it's just Stephen Miller, right? He's a little bit of a loose cannon and I think very much an extremist. But no, it's more than just him. Here's Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Take a listen to this.
Secretary, CNN yesterday pushed an app that lets you track where ICE agents are. Tom Homan was saying that perhaps CNN should be prosecuted for that. That's obstruction of law enforcement. Your response?
Yeah, we're working with the Department of Justice to see if we can prosecute them for that, because what they're doing is actively encouraging people to avoid law enforcement activities, operations, and we're going to actually go after them and prosecute them with the partnership of PAM if we can, because what they're doing, we believe, is illegal.
So to be clear, guys, she's not talking about the app developer, the, app person who created this app and who's encouraging people to report ICE. And I mean, clearly the idea there is so people can get out of Dodge and they don't get detained and deported. She's not talking about going after him. They're talking about going after CNN for reporting on it, which is their First Amendment protected freedom of the press. That's just objectively something they cannot do under our Constitution, and for good reason. We don't want the government locking up journalists just because they do coverage they're not satisfied with. Even if you could legitimately critique that coverage, that's still not okay. But I also want to show you something from Fox News, where they are seemingly egging on the prosecution of one of their competitors. We're going to take a look at that after this. Artificial intelligence is the future, and video editing is no different. Today's sponsor, Opus Clip, is a pioneer in this space and turns 2 years old this June. I first encountered Opus Clip as the coolest cutting-edge AI video clipping service, but it's evolved into much more than just that. Now, Opus Clip is the leading AI growth tool for creators. Opus Clip now helps creators save time and stay consistent by automating their entire short-form video workflow. With the new auto import feature, Opus Clip can automatically pull in your latest YouTube videos and instantly auto edit your videos into social ready clips. You can also select specific playlists for smarter import control. And coming soon, the auto scheduler will allow you to bulk select clips and schedule them for when you're out of the office or on vacation, so your content keeps going live. This makes it easier than ever to stay active across multiple platforms with little effort. You can try out Opus Clip and even participate in their Clip the Future contest over the next month and get free credits or potentially even win a MacBook Pro up to $5,000 cash or other awesome prizes. Head to www.opus.pro/clip-the-future now to check it out. So listen, I know that the networks are competing with each other, but at the end of the day, they're all journalists, and they're all political journalists who, depending on who's in power, may or may not have a friendly relationship with the federal government. So you would really think that just for consistency's sake or even their own self-interest, Fox News people would not be egging on the prosecution of a news network simply for reporting on the existence of something the administration views as illegal or bad. But that's kind of what's happening. Take a look at this clip of Fox News host Lawrence Jones egging on Tom Homan, Trump's immigration czar, to potentially prosecute CNN.
Tom, they've crossed the line here. This is out of control.
I know, it's just simply disgusting, and any network that covers that is disgusting as well. So I'm hoping DOJ steps in there and see if they cross that line of impeding federal law enforcement officers. Look, Lawrence, you and I talk about this. Assaults against ICE is up over 500%. Now you got an app that's going to tell where ICE operations are going to be. It's only a matter of time before ICE agents are ambushed by some nut, like what happened in LA, throwing a Molotov cocktail, throwing bricks at these officers. This is just disgusting at every level. So I hope DOJ dives in this deeply.
I'm sorry, what? I mean, look, nobody wants federal law enforcement officials assaulted. I certainly don't, though I will point out that the increase in assaults on them that they keep citing is likely because they're making more arrests. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but of course, it stands to reason that then they will have more resistance of arrests and more assaults on them. It's just part of, I think, ramping up immigration enforcement, which is what they want to do. Of course, we don't want assaults. We don't want attacks on federal law enforcement, anything like that. And I don't think they're crazy for worrying about that this app could be used this way, but you can't prosecute CNN for reporting on the existence of an app where people can report ICE officials' locations. One, that app itself is what you should go after if you think it's illegal. Even then, it actually might be First Amendment protected, which we'll talk about. But regardless, CNN has every right to do journalism and report on an interesting and meaningful development, which is this app that's currently on the App Store. You can go download it. So it's not like they're even reporting on some illicit black market thing. Even then, though, they would have a First Amendment right to do that and be free from prosecution. Y'all sound like authoritarians. Y'all don't sound like free speech supporters. Y'all sound nuts. Call me crazy, but I think top officials in the federal government should have a basic respect for the First Amendment and the freedom of the press, even for networks they hate, like CNN. I agreed with this tweet from Mediaite editor-in-chief, where he wrote, he pointed out that the Fox News chyron read, CNN appears to promote app tracking ICE agents. Aiden pointed out that reporting on something is not promoting it. The CNN segment in question even described the app as controversial. Aiden called this a totally ridiculous attempt by Fox to criminalize the work of a competitor. I mean, I have to agree with him that this is totally hypocritical. And it's like, also, you're already crushing CNN in the ratings so badly. Like, so badly. Do you really have to kick them while they're down? But more importantly, right, there's a basic freedom of press element here. Imagine something different, right? Because when you're trying to understand these kinds of issues, you should always try to remove it from the issue where you may have underlying biases, like immigration enforcement. Even if you're a Republican, even if you're a conservative, even if you're a Trump supporter, and you want mass deportation, so you support ICE. I understand. I have a slightly different view on that, though I think some deportations are necessary, but we can talk about all that. So separate it for that. Imagine this scenario. Imagine that during peak COVID, California was, and this is real, arresting people on the beach for going outside when they weren't supposed to, or arresting people for not wearing masks or complying with mask mandates. And some resilient people started to make an app where you could report the presence of law enforcement doing COVID checks, and so people could kind of avoid them. Then imagine that Fox News reported on the existence of this app, which hadn't been banned yet, hadn't been adjudicated as illegal or anything like that, and was literally in the App Store. And then the Biden administration suggested they might have their Department of Justice prosecute Fox News. Or, the California Department of Justice under Gavin Newsom suggested they might prosecute Fox News for obstructing justice by reporting on the existence of an app, even favorably reporting on it, that may or may not, to some extent, interfere with law enforcement operations. Fox News hosts would call that dystopian censorship. They would call that authoritarianism. They would call that an attack on the First Amendment. And they would be right. But because it's Trump, because it's CNN, and because it's a chance to own the libs, they feel differently. That's not principled. That's not consistent. That's not respectable or fair. Now, I think the app itself is much murkier territory. And if the Trump administration was simply saying that they were going to investigate the maker of this app, the ICE Block app that allows people to tag the locations of ICE agents, theoretically, so other people can see it and get out of town if they don't want to get arrested, presumably, illegal immigrants. If they were just going after the app itself, if they were just investigating the app maker, I mean, okay, right? That would be something they were at least within the realm of normal law enforcement to investigate. But going after CNN for covering it is just vindictive, mini authoritarian, petty behavior. And even on the app itself, I mean, this would have to be litigated in court, but there's an argument that actually simply reporting the location of law enforcement doesn't meet the threshold for obstruction of justice and is protected free speech. So that would have to be litigated in court over this. There is some precedent to this effect. For example, like the Waze app that I use allows you to report the police presence so people know a speeding check or trap is coming up. That hasn't been banned. That's not illegal. In fact, some federal courts have even ruled that you have a First Amendment right to flash your headlights at someone to alert them of a speeding trap coming up. You could argue that alerting people of the presence of ICE agents, if you're not calling for violence, if you're not interfering with them exactly, doesn't meet any sort of threshold of obstruction of justice. You could argue that, but at least, I can see why they would want to make that app illegal if they're trying to do federal law enforcement. That would be a debate that would have to be had in court, but it's at least, debatable within the realm of normal law enforcement. Wanting to prosecute media you don't like is not. And the Trump administration needs to get a grip on this stuff because their disdain for freedom of the press is really un-American at times and really, I think, runs against the spirit and letter of our First Amendment. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me and support the Trump administration on this? Even if you do, I'm open to your feedback, your criticism. I want to hear from you for sure. So let me know what you think in the comments. Do hit that like button while you're at it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you aren't yet. And remember to send in your voice notes for my Voicemail Friday episodes where I listen to your woke horror stories, your personal life situations, and give you my advice or answer any questions you guys have for me. The link to send one of those in is in the description. Okay, guys, up next, I told you, we're going to criticize CNN. I don't have any soft spot in my heart for CNN other than the one time they let me on air and it got spicy and I haven't been invited back yet. But hit me up. I will come on. Anyway, guys, up next, we're going to react to perhaps the most legendary and unhinged CNN crashout of all time. The former congressman, New York Congressman Jamal Bowman, who you may remember as the dude who pulled the fire alarm in Congress, allegedly to attempt to disrupt a vote or something. I don't remember the exact details, and then ended up not winning re-election. He was on the panel on CNN's Newsnight show with Abby Phillip, and perhaps made one of the craziest claims I've heard in a long time. Warning, guys, this is unhinged.
This is America.
Catholic
pro-life
ministries bombed.
We are not dealing
Catholic
with
pro-life
America's
ministries bombed.
original sin and its disease of hate and racism towards black and brown people and sexism towards women and anti-LGBTQ sentiment. We are not dealing with that. Your colleagues in the Republican Party do not hold each other accountable when it comes to the racism that comes from the party on a consistent basis.
Congressman, I mean, where are you on?
You can't be calm about this. I'm a black man in America. The reason why heart disease.
I'm white. I can't comment.
Listen to what I'm saying. The reason why heart disease and cancer and obesity and diabetes are bigger in the black community is because of the stress we carry from having to deal with being called the N-word directly or indirectly every day. If your colleagues would listen and try to learn and engage and grow and stop being so hateful, we could have a better country. Jamal. But unfortunately, we're still here.
Indirectly is crazy work, is doing crazy work in this context, because Jamal Bowman, this former congressman, actually just suggested that the reason black people have higher rates of health complications is because they are directly or indirectly called the N-word every day. Sir, what are you talking about? What are you actually talking about? Now, I could believe that a very high-profile black politician or political figure who's very divisive could perhaps be called that online every day. I get called slurs almost every day on the internet myself, but that's not true for your average black person. That's simply not true in America today, that they're being called slurs on a daily basis or being racially abused on a daily basis. And to suggest that that is the primary cause, just blatant, in-your-face racism is the blatant cause of health disparities between white and black Americans is just totally not true. Now, I know there's something called the minority stress model. I'm very skeptical about the claims made there, but even then, that ties into much bigger picture issues than alleged daily invocation of slurs against people that is not in fact happening, is not in the room with us. And I will just say that there's just objectively a lot more to it than that. I mean, I am open to the idea that part of the reason there's more of these health issues among the Black community is because of systemic barriers they face. I think it's probably largely a class distinction, right? They tend to have less money and less resources and lower income than other groups, and that probably correlates to lower access to healthcare and preventative measures and healthy lifestyles and other things. And you could argue that some of that definitely traces back to historical racism or the inability to pass down wealth along the generations. That is not an argument I'm closed off to, though I think it's complicated. But there's also a piece of it for some of these conditions that may be genetic, and there's a very large piece of it that is lifestyle related. And another way of describing that is that it's also choice related to the choices that people make. So painting it off as if it's all just because people are being called the N-word on a daily basis strikes me as absurd and totally missing any actual issues or nuance to be had about this kind of conversation, which makes it about par for the course for Jamal Bowman. This other story, he just really seems to see racism everywhere, even when it isn't, in fact, the likely cause. Take a look at this clip as well from the same conversation.
I don't want to fight. I just want to chill. I just want to not. I was walking down the street the other day. Some white dude, bald head, he looked me, called me a piece of shit to my face. Said, "I'm gonna get what's coming to me." Why I gotta deal with that, dog? In Yonkers, New York.
Well, can I tell you something?
I'm not making that up.
So this is very telling to me because he, at least this is my reading of his comments here, is suggesting that this is like some random racist white dude saying this to him because he is just a random Black person. I think a much more likely explanation is that this person doesn't like Jamal Bowman, knows who he is, knows about his unhinged left-wing politics, and said something, rude to him. But his mind jumps to, I must be being racially discriminated against as a Black man. I mean, at some point there is like a victim mentality here that is so overwhelming. Not to say there's no real victimization or racism against Black people. Of course there is, but you start to see it where it doesn't exist. If you're so obsessed with identity and victimhood and constantly playing the victim like this, I mean, it's remarkable. And I almost feel bad for people like him because it's got to be a miserable way to go through life. But we should really collectively stop indulging it. Stop indulging these silly stretches and these, oh, well, it's your truth that you experienced racism. Well, maybe, how about what the facts say? Forget your truth. Forget your experience. What actually happened? I think that should be maybe more important. And people should get more comfortable questioning the legitimacy of other people's experiences and truth. Just because you feel something doesn't make it real, doesn't make it valid. And I'm sick of coddling these people's feelings, these woke left-wing people who see victimhood and oppression around every corner, and we're supposed to just nod along. It actually discredits the legitimate conversations about inequality we should be having, if you ask me. Okay, guys, up next, we're going to talk about the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, the massive tax cut and spending bonanza legislation that just passed the Senate and now goes back to the House after many changes were made to potentially be passed and await President Trump's signature. Here's some reporting from CNBC with the latest on the Big Beautiful Bill.
The president's big tax and spending bill now on its way back to the House of Representatives. This after passing the Senate by the slimmest of margins. Emily Wilkins is in Washington, D.C. this morning, staying up like all day, all night. Never stops for you.
Well, maybe it will stop today, Andrew. I mean, we're going to see here. But if it's going to pass the House today, then Speaker Mike Johnson, he's going to have to change a couple no's to yeses before starting on this vote for the mega bill. Remember, in the House, if you have full attendance, Johnson can only lose 3 Republicans and still get the bill passed. But right now, there are roughly about a dozen members that are either planning to vote no or have some really serious concerns with this bill. Now, some of these members, they're Republicans from more centrist districts. experts who worry they could lose re-election next year over Medicaid and SNAP cuts. Others are, of course, your fiscal hawks. They've been frustrated for a while with this bill that adds more than $3.4 trillion to the debt over the next 10 years. That's a number updated just last night by the Congressional Budget Office. Some members are annoyed that some of the clean energy tax credits are still in the measure. The Senate measure, remembers, does allow wind and solar programs to get some tax credits if they start construction in the next year. I chatted a bit with Congressman Tim Burchett. He told me he's in the I'm not sure column and needs more time, but he thinks that it's not just him. He thinks more time in general is needed to hash out disagreements with the bill, and he's skeptical that Republicans are even going to be able to agree to a procedural rule vote.
This massive legislation really is a cluster, and if I was to tell you everything that's in it, we'd be here a very, very long time. Frankly, the people in Congress don't know everything that's in it. They keep discovering tiny items that someone slipped in there and no one noticed and being like, wait, take that out, or wait, I don't want that, because we have very serious people who run our country. But here's an overview from Washington Post chief economics reporter Jeff Stein, who, listen, I'm a little suspect of WAPO, I understand, but he does pretty good work on this stuff. And he goes through what's in this exactly. So he says that 2.5 trillion of the cost of this legislation goes to extending or increasing the prior GOP tax cuts with broad reach. So this is the kind of what you think of as the middle and working class tax cuts the GOP passed of in 2017 in Trump's first term. He then says about 1 trillion of the bill's cost goes to tax cuts that benefit the top 1%, and then about $500 billion goes to Trump's 2024 campaign grab bag of random deductions. So deductions for seniors, no tax on tips, deductions for car interest payments. That's an odd one to me, but what do I know? Nobody listens to me anyway. Then there is $500 billion for business tax breaks, expensing, R&D, etc. That is really important to long-term economic growth, guys, that businesses and corporations can write off their investments as an expense. And then there's also funding for immigration enforcement and the military budget, which is about $400 billion. Then he says there are major safety net cuts targeting Medicaid and food stamps, such as work requirements, new cost sharing, paperwork requirements. That saves about $1.3 trillion. So whereas those other numbers that we talked about were costs, that's a plus 1.3. In the same vein, they cut a bunch of clean energy subsidies from the Biden administration primarily, and that gives you about plus $500 billion. So some savings there, significant savings. And then there's a total deficit hit of about an additional $3 trillion. So my take on this is pretty simple. I think some of these things need to get done, need to get funded. For example, the middle income tax cuts, the working class tax cuts that Trump passed in his first term, those are really important. And people, if you don't pass some legislation extending those hit back, the old rates hit back in effect, and people will see a tax hike. We don't want that. In the same way, I think the business expensing and other provisions are important. Obviously, Americans do want more border security funding, but I think some of these tax breaks for the rich, these special loopholes and subsidies, and even just the top marginal tax cut rate, we could probably go without at this point if you care about the debt and deficit the way fiscal hawks say that they do. And I feel the same way about some of these special carve-outs where it's like, oh, no tax on tips. Well, I really don't think we should be randomly prioritizing, or write-offs for your car interest payments. These seem extremely niche, and it would be better to just cut rates across the board rather than carve out special little exemptions and deductions here for unique things. Anyway, I understand why Republicans are probably going to ultimately pass this bill because there are parts of it that need to get passed. But at the same time, it's really not okay to just pass legislation that will explode the national debt. And rest assured, Republican politicians are lying to you when they say this won't add to the debt. They're either using fake, cooked up numbers that rely on totally unreasonable frameworks or growth estimates. there's lots of good stuff in it that needs to pass, in my view, but it will add significantly to the national debt and the annual deficit. That's just the truth. And I don't think that's responsible to pass something that big of an explosion of the debt. Here's a statement from Maya McGinnis, who's the president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. The level of blatant disregard we just witnessed for our nation's fiscal condition and budget process is a failure of responsible governing. These are the very same lawmakers who for years have bemoaned the nation's massive debt, voting to put another $4 trillion on the credit card. The Senate took a bill that already borrowed way too much and took it from bad to worse. The Senate expanded the House's tax breaks, watered down its offsets, introduced new special interest giveaways, and added another $1 trillion onto the price tag. The Senate bill would add $600 billion to the deficit in 2027 alone, pushing deficits above 7% of GDP, drive debt to new record highs, and accelerate the insolvency of Social Security and Medicare. Claims that it reduces the deficits rely on phony baselines, fantastical economic assumptions, and arbitrary expirations. If made permanent, the Senate bill would cost more than the CARES Act, the American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the CHIPS Act combined. Wow. So what she's saying with that is that those big, wasteful COVID-era spending plans and early Biden administration spending legislation, according to their analysis, this bill adds more to the debt than all of those combined, which, wow. They conclude the Senate reconciliation bill fails almost every test of fiscal responsibility. Instead of worrying about arbitrary deadlines or sparing the Senate another vote-a-rama, fiscal conservatives should stand up for what's right and reject the Senate plan to explode our debt. To me, this is exactly right. Republicans my whole lifetime have claimed to care about fiscal responsibility as our nation is driven off the cliff into financial crisis and just mounting piles of debt. And now that they're in power with very slim majorities, I will admit, which makes it hard to make tough cuts or controversial changes, but to go past something this fiscally irresponsible, I think is a betrayal of the public and of the promises that President Trump campaigned on. We were told he would balance the budget. And now that was always a ridiculous claim, but he said that over and over again. So much for any of that, I suppose. I guess we were lied to and our futures are being mortgaged. So today is a day that ends in Y in Washington, D.C. I hate it here. Okay, up next, we're going to talk about another controversy involving Trump, Florida, Ron DeSantis, the immigration crisis, and so much more. And this is all the hubbub and alarmism about what's being called Alligator Alcatraz, the new federal immigration detention facility that apparently is like in a remote location and has crocodiles. So they're calling it Alligator Alcatraz because it will be really hard to escape from. Shocker. It is leading to widespread panic from the media, from TikTok, and so much more. But before we get into that, I just want to watch this clip from Fox News where they're actually on site with Governor DeSantis and he walks them through it. Let's take a look at that clip.
Joining us right now is Governor Ron DeSantis here in the great state of Florida. You came up with this idea in the last couple of weeks, right? For Alcatraz or Alligator Alcatraz. Explain it.
Well, when you want to have deportation of illegal aliens, there's a process that DHS has to go through to vet, to process, and then to stage them for removal.
Right.
And, we've got jails, and our sheriffs and police are working. The state of Florida is all in on President Trump's mission. And obviously you have ICE operations, but that's not enough. And so there needs to be more ability to intake, process, and then deport. So this answers that. This is going to be able to have more than 3,000 illegals can be processed through here. We've got a massive runway right behind us where any of the federal assets, if they want to fly these people back to their home country, they can do it one-stop shop.
And you've thought of everything. Okay, so there are 4 gigantic tents. Let's come on over here, Governor. And people are thinking, okay, you're in the middle of the Everglades. It's hot. That would explain why you've got this bank of air conditioners here.
Yeah, so, this is going to be, illegals will come in, they'll be processed. There'll be places for them to be housed. You'll have an ability for food. You'll have an ability for them to consult legal rights if they have that, because there is a process that's involved with this. So this is really everything. This is going to be a self-contained little area. And then, of course, you also have stuff for the staff that work here. So we've got laundry facilities, we've got showers, we've got, obviously, there you see the shower and bath facilities. There's not going to be anything that they're hurting for anything. There'll be AC, there'll be things that everybody needs. There's medical here. So it's being done right. It's being done by the book.
So I don't know about you guys, but I'm just not that horrified by this at first glance, and we will go into more details about it. But there's air conditioning, there's facilities that are clean and orderly. It doesn't look like a, 5-star hotel or even a 3-star hotel, but it doesn't look like torturous conditions or like inhumane or anything. And I guess we won't really know until it's in operation, but it looks like it's set up to be an okay place to store people temporarily while their immigration cases are being heard and they're then being deported. Yet it is prompting like this insane meltdown. Here is disgraced ex-MSNBC host and political activist Joy Reid calling it a concentration camp for brown and black people. Yes, seriously, take a listen.
To forget about him, but Ron DeSantis is still governor of Florida. He took the Comfy Couch hosts on a tour of the concentration camp that he's building in Florida in order to round up brown people, and throw them in a camp because he doesn't want them in Florida. Surprise, surprise, the economy of Florida is going to be severely harmed by rounding up brown people who, by the way, all over this country, Latinos are afraid to go to work. Anybody who is perceived or looks Latino is afraid to go to work.
I'm sorry. I have been very critical of some of the immigration stuff going overboard, violating civil liberties, but this is absurd. It is not a concentration camp. And that is a wild accusation and term to just throw around willy-nilly and kind of offensive to, the many victims of actual concentration camps. And I'm sorry, but this is like ridiculous. This, just brown and black people are being rounded up and put in camps. No, illegal immigrants are. Now, may there be some mistakes? Maybe some people are apprehended wrongly? Yes, that is a serious problem, and that's why you have to have a fair due process. However, to suggest that this camp, even with the mistakes, illegal immigrants are going to be the ones in this camp, not random brown and black people. There might be an example of an error or a person mistakenly put there who has to wait days before they get out or whatever, and that's horrible, and I totally think that's wrong, and that's why we need to have civil liberties protections and access to your attorneys and hearings and other things. But to actually suggest that DeSantis is just going to be putting random brown and black people in there is absurd. It's not true. To suggest that he doesn't want brown people in this state in Florida is absurd. It's not true. And people like this just sound delulu. Similarly, here is Tim Walz's daughter, the progressive failed vice presidential nominee and governor of Minnesota. Here's his daughter, who is a TikTok activist, going on a little rant about Alligator Alcatraz. Take a listen to this.
Alligator Alcatraz? Are we serious right now? These people are literally supervillains. At this point, they're just making up the cruelest ways they can torture people they don't like because of their skin color, where they're from. Wake the up, America. Seriously. We're supposed to be celebrating the 4th of July and we have Alligator Alcatraz.
Now, it's not just young people on TikTok or random crazy journalists doing this. Members of Congress are engaging in this kind of extreme alarmist rhetoric. Here is Congressman Maxwell Alejandro Frost. He wrote, "Alligator Alcatraz is a cruel spectacle. DHS and Florida officials are building it to brutalize, starve, and harm immigrants. And they don't care who lives or dies." Those are very serious accusations that seem just totally unsubstantiated. We saw the facilities. Nobody's being starved. They're going to be fed. They're going to be detained in detention facilities. That won't be fun, but they're not going to be brutalized either. That just seems baseless. Now, of course, if that were to be true, I would think that was horrible, and I would totally condemn whoever was involved in it, DeSantis, Trump, what have you, but that hasn't happened. I don't really see reason to believe it will happen at this facility. And until it does, throwing around these kinds of accusations just makes you look alarmist and like you're smearing your political opponents in really wild ways, in a way that's just unsubstantiated. Now, none of this is to say that like there's no legitimate criticisms to be had. For example, here is Benny Johnson, the far-right YouTuber and influencer, showing the merch items that the state of Florida provided him with from Alligator Alcatraz. Take a look at this.
I just want everyone to know that there's official Alligator Alcatraz merch. There it is, provided to us by the state of Florida. Incredible. And yeah, would you rock this drip? Look at that.
Is he like trying to be cringe? I hope he's trying, because if not, yikes. But similarly, the Department of Homeland Security posted this on their official government X account, and it's an presumably AI picture of a bunch of alligators wearing ice hats around a prison. I'm sorry, y'all, but like, this is just so unserious. Why are we trolling and selling merch about federal law enforcement and immigrant detention facilities? No matter what your views are on these issues, they're actually very serious, with human lives at stake and people being, deprived of their liberty and freedom. And call me old-fashioned, call me a sourpuss, call me a buzzkill, whatever you want. I just think there should be a level of seriousness with which government officials in particular treat these topics that I do not see represented in the Alligator Alcatraz merch or memes posted on official federal agencies' social media feeds. Wow. If you'd showed me this stuff like 5 years ago, I would have been like, that's ridiculous. Agencies are never going to be posting AI memes. But welcome to 2025, I guess. All right, guys, that'll be it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please do make sure you're subscribed. If you aren't yet, do hit that like button before you go. Comment with your thoughts. I take the time to read the comments. I really do love hearing what you guys have to say. And with that, guys, do send in your voice notes for Voice Note Friday. And we'll talk again real soon.